Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. Welcome to Storytelling Hour here at the School of Earth Astrology, where I'm live every Wednesday, Miércoles, Mercury's Day at 11:11 a.m. Pacific time, or in the case of today, 11:13 and change. I didn't know if I would make it today because we have a baby on the way any day now. Due date was actually today or tomorrow, depending on the math. And I find that math to be pretty weird. But, give or take a week or two. So any day, perhaps even any hour. And of course, Scorpiana and I and Koa over here, very excited for the baby to arrive. So I'm here to speak about overcoming the fear of T square. And some of this was motivated actually by, well, the birthing event that is about to happen. Because if you've been following the heavenly happenings, you know that Mars recently left his Aries abode to jump the wall into the Venusian zone we call Taurus, and thereby Mars now in Taurus, this fixed sign, perfecting a square with Aquarius Pluto. I was born with Scorpio Sun at the side of Uranus, and the two of them square Saturn and Leo, and all in these early degrees of fixed signs. And so now with Mars and Taurus and Pluto and Aquarius, it creates this complete grand cross or grand square between transiting planets Mars and Pluto and my own natal planets, Sun, Saturn, Uranus. And so it's like, okay, that looks difficult. I've spoken before about, hey, what do we do when the astrology is promoting more fear and challenge than breakthrough and opportunity? And it's something that I go back to consistently. I mean, in my work with clients, so often working with folks who are astrologically educated, who know their chart well, and they kind of hesitate to ask, but what about this thing? Oh no. And even we're trained in the astrological vernacular of our day to talk about transiting planets as if they're hitting us. And you'll read this all the time, right? Like the planets right now, they're just hitting me, they're slaying me, they're beating around, these kinds of things. Like, we really need to be careful with our language. But that's not in any way to suggest that astrology isn't scary at times. Then we have to sit with how to process that, right? And, of course, we need an astrology that can reflect about challenging times too. It's nice to work in life with an optimistic point of view and to really work with our charts productively. I mean, for me, that's the deal. Those things I share that are kitschy, like choose change before change chooses you, when Pluto transits or Uranus, other agents of change, for example, or, you want to work these transits so they don't work you. And there you hear me even guilty of this thing that I'm speaking about, of like, let's be careful with our spells. Let's be careful with our language. I think it's a really important truth. But we also have to honor that really terrible tragedies and traumas happen in life, and our astrology should speak to that as well. And truthfully, for me, and this will bring us to the subject of the day, like particularly like looking into dealing with the fears that can be invoked by the astrological T square, that, like music, charts offer tension and release. And I very much appreciate that musical view or overstanding, because music without tension is whack. It's just boring. Yeah, I bet you've been to that crystal bowl ceremony where you're laying down and there's just these beautiful sounds offering kind of a bed for your consciousness to relax into. And just as you found that tranquility, if the practitioner is tuned in, then they hit that bowl that brings a tension, that brings a dissonance, and then the work begins, right? And that tension comes and it allows us to move through some of the stuck places, right? And release. And then on the other side, when the consonance returns, because we've done our work, now we're in a place of, well, relaxation that has been earned. Right? We didn't go there just to like get away from life. We went there to do life in a very profound and accelerated and ceremonial way. Do you see what I mean? And I feel like our charts are this, that our charts offer spaces in each in our own unique way of like consciously intended, or let me say like soul intended tension, because it's the tension that helps to activate us and then also brings us to growth. And this is a school of growth. Yeah, we grow through what we go through. And in the end, that sweet release. And I think I just maybe I should just speak for myself. I imagine that if the tension has activated and we have chosen as a result more feeling, more healing, and therefore more knowing and more growing. In the end, at the release, there we feel much more released because we don't look back and think that we've wasted a opportunity. Yeah, and so this is built into the charts of the moment, right? Like how we're experiencing some of the tensions of now. So actually, when I looked at the chart for today, Wednesday, Miércoles, June 12th, 2024, and observed that the Virgo moon, let's get this image on the screen, is on the way into T square with everything in Gemini. Sun currently at the Mercury Venus midpoint, squaring Pisces Saturn. And so moon isn't quite there yet. We see the moon currently in square with Jupiter. So moon trined Mars and translated the light of Taurus Mars to a square with Gemini Jupiter. And her next meeting will be in opposition with Saturn. So let me actually just go some hours ahead of the moment now. And we'll see moon advancing in the zodiac degrees to this point where she finds her opposition with Saturn. Here in Pacific time, California, where I reside, looks like that happens around 1:20 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, Jupiter's Day, June 13th, 2024. And then we get this really strong square, right? And by the way, Mars squared Pluto, and that square between Mars and Pluto perfected already. And so now Mars is separating from the Pluto square. The perfection was yesterday, Tuesday, Mars's day, June 11th, 2024 at 6:21 a.m. Pacific. Taurus, Mars square, Aquarius, Pluto, right? And then now Mars is on his way out of that. But the sound is still around, right? So for me, the musical model, it really helped. It's actually much more than a model. That planets are like instruments. They all have their own specific timbre, their own specific tone, that they play the note of the sign in which they reside. In the simple map that I use, if you speak music, it's a chromatic map. I align A with Aries and increase from there. So Taurus is A sharp or B flat, in Gemini B, in Cancer C, and it moves on like this. So the sound of a square, by the way, would be a minor third, a trine a major third, That's tension and release, right? So Mars currently playing that Martian instrument, but playing B flat, and Pluto playing that Pluto instrument, but playing G, which is Aquarius in the map that I use to turn, astrology charts to musical harmony and musical harmony to astrology charts. It can just be really helpful to help me kind of embody and help me help others to embody the experience of the heavenly happenings and try to get it out of the mind space alone and into the body mind. When we can activate that body mind and the brain's happening, then we meet in the middle, which is the heart. And friends, the art of the chart starts in the heart. And we measure the placements of the planets in the signs, not from the surface where we reside, but rather from the center of the earth where all earthlings are one. That's a very important truth. Like, we are actually in astrology, at least for the planets in the signs. Planets in the houses, that is a surface truth. And that's why it's different for you right now than it is for me, because we're in different places on the surface of the earth, but we share the center of the earth. Surface, above, particular, center, below, whole. Surface, houses, center, signs. Right? So the planets are in the same degrees of the same signs for all of us on Earth right now. It's a geocentric and Earth-centered zodiac. In my experience, or at least religion, it's not about energies coming to us from out there, or the signs aren't coming to us from the stars. They are emanating from the crystal core of Earth outwards. But in a true as above, so below experience, we measure the planets out there in the signs from the center of the earth. We are measuring our experience of Earth's experience of the current chord played by the celestial symphony, you see. And some of those chords, right? You take this note, you take that note, and you put them together, and it's like, this is like pretty tense and dissonant, right? So the musical map that I use, I'm looking for an instrument where I could play this for you. One's not around. I'm not sure how it would come through anyway. But for those of you who speak music, the T square sounds like a diminished triad. It's a very tense sound. It's kind of that feel of like the spaghetti western where the cat goes into the saloon and everybody in there playing cards and like looks and like, and maybe even guns get drawn, right? There's a tension here. All right. So as an astrologer, I can't help, and it's not healthy, to look at the charts, right, at this time when my baby's about to be born and say, oh, I hope she waits until after that thing clears up a little bit. Or I could see how that makes a ton of sense. I said earlier, when Pluto's around, choose change before change chooses you. Well, you know what, I was speaking about my chart. Maybe I'll just put it on the screen here for you. Let me push a few buttons before I do. Okay, I'll show you my chart and a transit chart for the moment now. So this is my nativity. I was born October 24th, 1975. I don't know what happened here because I was born at 7:39 p.m. In Boston, Massachusetts. 9.5 Gemini on the rise. Now you know everything about me, including, as I shared before, that I have this kind of strong square in my chart between Scorpio, Sun, and Uranus, and Leo, Saturn here, right? Well, in the transiting picture in this moment now, Pluto, as you know, is in Aquarius, and therefore in this place of the zodiac that is square to that zone that hosted the Sun and Uranus at the time of my birth. So I'm experiencing a Pluto square Sun, a Pluto square Uranus, and a Pluto opposite Saturn transit. Now that's a long-standing thing of like 20 months. And in the midst of this time, Mars has just recently come into Taurus to oppose my Scorpio, Uranus, and Sun. and to square my natal Saturn in Leo and just completing this grand fixed cross, right? And it's hard not to freak out about, about that. Now, Pluto wants change, and typically unprecedented change that maybe you're not even prepared to deal with, right? I have a lot of fear about how that might look. It's hard not to look at Pluto and just be like, oh my gosh, I'm scared, right? But I'm about to become a dad of a baby, 48 years old. Right? Like there's all sorts of things that are just shocking change in that, and something that was in a way though planned for very recently. It wasn't necessarily on the map like 3 years ago. And of course, my life is going to change in ways that I can't even understand. And my question is like, isn't that enough? Right? Like, and again, choose change before change chooses you. So were I sitting with a client who was asking me, for example, like what's on the horizon, or as I said earlier, like most of my clients, like many of them are astrologers, or astrology students, emerging astrologers, and they might come to me and say, hey, there's this big Pluto transit and I'm wondering, and so I just started like, hey, what in your life wants to change? Do you have any visions of big change in your life, right? And I'm like, well, my partner's pregnant. That sounds pretty big, right? Like that sounds like it'll work. And then we'll look at where the stars are in the natal chart and the like, and see what it seems this transit wants to activate. Anyway, so to retrograde back to a thing I was saying before, it's unhealthy, but it's hard not to contemplate, well, if daughter's born at this time, oh wow, amazing, she'll have her Mercury Venus sun on my moon. And if she's born tomorrow, then her moon will be on my Venus. Oh, that reminds me that Saturn's currently opposing my Venus, right? So, like the synastry, what's it look like with her mother? Those kinds of things, right? And it's hard to just like shelf that and put that away and just let the baby be born when the baby's being born. Now, the good news is I can't do anything about it. Like the baby's going to come in when the baby comes in, and I prefer to believe that has something to do with the chart that she is choosing or arranging. There's a great story I was told once by a couple who, like Scorpion and myself, were astrologers. And unfortunately, they found out that they had to deliver by C-section. And then they were asked what day they would like to schedule. And they were like, oh, should we look at the astrology? Should we elect our child's chart? And they kind of went back and forth on it in this debate about, should they be playing, well, the conductor of their child's celestial symphony, right? And they decided in the end that it was their responsibility to do so, that they had learned this great cosmic craft, that they had developed this tool, and surely that part of their parenting of this child was to use everything that they could to help the child grow and all these things. And then starting right there, including like, let's like arrange for the best rising sign of that day or the best day of this week. I think they had a week to choose. And so let's choose this day and let's choose that time of that day. Well, what ended up happening is they were there on that day, and here came the time they elected. And of course, you can't elect like nighttime, probably, if you're scheduling C-section, right? So they had a window of options, and they chose the day and they chose the time. And just when their time came around and everything was about to happen, there was an emergency down the hall that the doctor and the nurse had to go attend to. And by the time they were able to have their procedure, she was able to have her procedure for the baby to come through. It was like the last time they would choose on that day. And maybe the last time that they would have chosen for that week. So baby had, in that case, his own plan. Yeah. And I think it's just important for us to remember that well, I shared a video, I think yesterday morning, about expectation is the enemy of experience, right? And while it's good, I think, for us to have a vision and to set our intentions and do what we can to align with the happenings of the heavens in such a way that we can most beautifully dance to the music that's available now. We don't always get to choose the tune. Winter writes here, yep, the best laid plans. Exactly. Hey, Winter, good to see you. Hey, Emmy and Tracy and Lillian. Hey, by the way, all three of you and others here are part of the School of Astrology's constellations. And I'm really stoked to say, I hope you know that Phelan Chiva will teach her first Astro Tarot jam in constellations this eve. So actually, while I'm saying that, let me put a link on the screen here, friends, where you can find out about constellations. I teach a class every month on Earth astrology, astronomy. Amala Hall is teaching an astro herbalism class every month. Alyssa Luna is leading an astro embodiment practice every month. Phelan Shiva is going to start her monthly transmissions of astro tarot correspondences tonight. We're going to have many more things there actually for the budding astrologers who want experience. We are going to, at some point here, probably in the Cancer season, begin reading exchange circles. We have community discussions 5 times a week at least. Winter, thanks again for leading the Tuesday discussion yesterday. I greatly appreciate that. It's an amazing space to come play, and we're still offering the maiden voyage price for constellations of only $16 a month or $160 a year. If you want to help me through my time of change of a baby being born, where of course I'm freaking out a bit about how am I going to provide. I've chosen the life of astrologer and such. That's a great way that you could support my work while also receiving just tons and tons of amazing astro value and an opportunity to connect with fellows of like mind and heart. So please check out Constellations, geminibrett.com/constellations to find out more. Okay, so right, these squares. Let's talk number magic a bit. Speaking about squares, diamonds, which is what I always envision when I tune into the sacred sciences that were once called quadrivium. Now, at the top of the diamond is a sacred science called astronomy. And when I say top of the diamond, it isn't necessarily hierarchy, okay? But traditionally, astronomy was expressed in this way. Astronomy is number in time and space. And in a sense, that's why I can see it as the top of this diamond, or the part that we're journeying towards, because number in time and space consists of number in space, and that is geometry. Typically these days, I'll use the term sacred geometry so you don't have like a flashback about some happening in the 8th grade that turned you off to math, you know? On this side, number in time. This is frequency, harmony. right? So musical harmony, we can say sacred harmony. Everything is sacred, but it's good to remember that. I even like to teach sacred astronomy. Let me get back to that. So astronomy, number in time and space, composed of number in space, geometry, number in time, harmony, and those of number itself. Now, the tradition that was called arithmetic, and that word even more so might freak you out, or just might lead you to believe that we're speaking about, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, like the way that you and I received arithmetic. But friends, that is simply the quantity of number. Let me go back up and we'll speak about, well, let's talk about number in time, harmony, right? So, and let's talk about the difference between noise and sound, at least the way that I know it and the way that I teach it. There's the ancient riddle, right? If a tree falls in the woods and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? And people will say, well, the leaves heard it. Well, that's somebody then. Right? So the question says, and no one around is around to hear it. If you feel that leaves hear, then when we're not only speaking about a human being there to hear it, okay? There is a chance to contemplate the idea about, what level of consciousness, mineral, plant, animal, whatever, is able to experience noise and what is able to experience sound. And I don't have answers there, but I encourage that contemplation. The way that I know this currently, and I like to share this, is that the falling tree makes a noise, but only makes a sound if someone is around. Noise being the quantity of sound, if you will. It is the thing that vibrates the medium. We can put a ruler to it and measure it. It is measurable. There is amplitude, there is frequency, many other ways we could describe the waves, right? Scientifically. And this is noise, it's that measurable quantity. Sound is the immeasurable quality. Right? Like I could put a song on from my old band, and some of y'all would like hippie dance to it, and some of you would just turn the video off because you're like, what is that mess? Right? Like we can go to a concert together, for example, and really have a great time, and it's such a beautiful bonding experience, as you all know. But if we try to describe our personal experience of what happened, it is very personal, right? Like a noise is. Sound is particular, right? In a sense, it's like noise, the whole, sound particular. And that's why perhaps the fives, and I'm getting ahead of myself because we should 1, 2, 3, 4 first. Perhaps the fives are kind of a lonely thing. They're beautiful and creative and artistic, right? But even there in art, right, we each have our own vision. When we create together, there's always a level of compromise, but that's a small thing to give for the great reward of co-creation, which is amazing, at least when it's working. Yeah. All right. I think you're feeling me. So when we get to astronomy, number in time and space, we'll learn that astronomy and astrology were once the same thing. Not really. I mean, the astrologers all knew astronomy back then. You had to. And I'm very much alive as part of a movement that wants to help astrologers now, though we have the benefits of these great charts to know that that chart is a map of the living sky. And that if you can learn to see the chart in the sky, you can bring more of the living sky into the chart. Yeah. Um, right. But astronomy is this measurable thing, and astrology, if you will, is the immeasurable. Really, astrology is the thing between the measurable and the immeasurable. The immeasurable we once called correspondences. These days, people almost kind of treat correspondences as if that is astrology. Astrology, for me, it's the rainbow bridge between the measurable noise, the astronomy, the things I can take a ruler to, like moon, square, sun, right? And the correspondence is kind of immeasurable. What does that invoke in you? Well, if it's moon on your natal Venus, squaring the sun, Mercury, Venus, and opposing Saturn, right? Like you're going to have that experience perhaps in a different way than others will. I mean, interestingly, if you play by the old rules, Venus represents children in my chart because I was born with Gemini on the rise and therefore Libra, Venus is sign on the fifth, the house of kids. Right. So perhaps part of the way that I'm experiencing this Saturn, well, the way I'm experiencing this Saturn Venus opposition, this transit, this activation, this initiation is like dealing with patience and some fear and a lot of organization and preparation, right? And real world about, having a child, becoming a dad. You see what I'm saying? Well, perhaps that same transit is aligning to your moon. And perhaps your moon speaks for the 10th. And this has something to do with the way that you are designed to be a meticulous nurturer, right? In your works and how you share your gifts with this world. So there's this noise, right? There's this thing that we can measure, but the sound, how you experience it versus how you and you and you experience, or me, that's going to be different. Yes. And again, like I could just crank up some music right now and maybe you feel like running towards it because you love it, or maybe you feel like running away because you really don't, right? And that's a very unique and personal and particular thing. And for me, the noise is the 4 and the sound is the 5. Okay, so number and time and space, astronomy, the measurable quantity of the heavenly happenings, astrology, the rainbow bridge between that measurable quantity and the immeasurable quality of correspondences. So I just want to check chat real quick and make sure that that bit at least is landing, that feels clear. All right. So I see a Sienna Dawn on right now, for she's just a brilliant artist and an artist who can create in many forms. But I think every piece I've ever seen by Sienna Dawn is like a portal that draws you in, at least I should say that draws me in, right? Because that sound again versus noise, that draws me into like a spiritual experience, right? And others who engage with Sienna's work are going to have a different type of experience. You have to be pretty asleep to see Sienna's painting and not have some kind of experience as far as I'm concerned. But this is as far as I'm concerned, right? It's noise, painting, sound, our experience of that. And hopefully, our experience will align with the artist's vision. But I imagine it's like a great joy for artists to hear what different individuals are experiencing in their work, and probably a tremendous surprise at times to see that people are experiencing a thing that they didn't intend to create. Sienna writes here, actually, listening while painting. Color me surprised. I haven't seen you not painting. Well, that's not true. But anyway, nice to see you, Sienna. It's been a while. And everyone, check out Sienna Dawn's work. She is amazing. I'm in her Instagram handle. It looks like Sienna of the Dawn. Go check out Sienna's work. Mind-blowing, heart-opening, amazing stuff. But anyway, and Sienna, thank you for being an example here, right? So there's a significant difference in a piece of art, right? Like, what does this do for you? This painting that I'm holding up. What does it do for you versus you, right? It's a thing. Oh, it's a drum too. And I don't mean to call that beautiful painting noise. I don't mean any offense when I say that, but it's noise. Your experience, the experience that it invokes in you personally, sound. That's how I work with these two things. Noise, quantity, measurable, sound, quality, immeasurable. And there's these sacred sciences that connect the two. And this is true for number as well. So yes, 1 plus 1 is 2 in quantity. Imagine if before we gave that key to the kids, that gets you stuck in quantity and measurable, rational world alone, we ask the kids to contemplate oneness. What's oneness plus oneness? That's a ridiculous question because the one is the only thing that ever was, is, and will be. I once asked a healer in Peru through a translator, hey, what did you do with that strange, like, dragon looking demon thing you pulled out of that guy last night? He's like, well, I'm surprised you saw that because that's what I was seeing. And usually people are seeing something different than what I see, and everybody has their own vision. Kind of sounds like noise and sound. But anyway, I asked him, well, what did you do with that thing? And he's like, come here. And he drew a circle in the sand. And he's like, this is the universe. He's like, I put it here. And he took it outside of the universe. And I just said, without commenting on what I feel to be true, that's impossible. Because the whole truth of the universe is it is the one, it is the monad. Now, people will talk about, like, alternate dimensions or parallel universes. That's like all of that is inside the universe. Okay, so you need a new name for that thing. Like, I don't care if it's a parallel universe to that one. These are just two parallel things within the universe, because the universe, if I use that term in this way, or call it, goddess, God, the all, the monad, whatever, it has many names. I'm talking about the one thing that ever was, is, and will be. I like to call it spirit, but that's a very subjective term. It's kind of like sound and noise, isn't it? Right? So the one, which on a plane we symbolize with the circle of spirit, which has no beginning and no end. It all emerges from one place, which is source, right? And that, by the way, is the circumpunct glyph that we use these days in astrology to depict the sun. Really, the circle on a plane is an image of the sphere, which some of the number magic traditions called the goddess, the heavenly form, the perfect form. A fun truth is that, well, let's see, the circle could be a cylinder too, but that's not spirit. Right? The spirit is the sphere, which expands in all directions forever from some place called source. Yeah, so this is the one. And again, what if we encouraged the kids, the adults, to truly contemplate oneness before we get lost in the quantity of 1 plus 1 equals 2? There was a conversation I listened to recently. I bet you some of it, you heard it as well, where there was, hey, 1 times 1 is not 1, because you can't multiply something without making it larger. Which is intriguing, but maybe the 1 times 1 equals 1 is actually an honor to the quantity, the immeasurable side of number, and the truth that oneness simply is all. Anyway, this is how I think. This is, if you and I spend time outside underneath the stars, we probably will navigate spaces like this together. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to share. And I should say, to that effect, I mean to have more guests on Storytelling Hour as the world turns. So stay tuned for that. I'm just reading from Phyllis. I had my daughter at the age of 40, a change of life, baby, and I had to pick her date. My first pick was not available, so I picked the Friday before. And Isabel's celebrating that. That's how Isabel celebrates, by the way. She's also celebrating mom coming home. But Phyllis, I love that the sentence ends with I, which is either the beginning of the next sentence or the one and the reminder that you are the one. You are the miracle of soul, reflecting spirit in a unique way that will never replete. Embodied in matter, embodied in the place with the appearance of time and space. Why? So spirit can grow. You see, the one thing is everything. And therefore, it's kind of like nothing. It's pretty boring, right? It can't really make moves. But this strange miracle happened. You've experienced it. Have you ever taken a good look at yourself? Okay, well, who are you looking at? And who's looking? You just became the not two. The crescent of soul is born and the cross of matter. So somehow spirit contemplated itself and a soul was born who manifested into matter. Why? Come to the place with the appearance of time and space, and it ain't easy. There's a lot of tension, but it promotes growth. And as you grow, the one only thing that ever was, is, and will be grows too. And by the way, I see that growth game as expressed by the rudder of your chart, the horoscope of your chart, which is the ascendant, and specifically the ascendant degree. Paige writes, the fractured whole we have our physical experience in. Yeah, that's cool to read. I mean, I will just say that for me, I've had a pretty significant cosmology shift in the last years and kind of moved away from, and maybe I'll return, I don't know, but moved away from a cosmology I once held, which was that we are all little pieces of spirit. Right. And then it's kind of like an addition game. You put all the little pieces together and you have the one thing. And maybe even then this, sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sums of the parts. But, there are no parts. The one is the one. It is inherently indivisible. And so Hermes says it this way: 'tis true without lying, certain and most true, that which is below is like that which is above, and that which is above is like that which is below, to do the miracles of one only thing. And as all things have been, and arose from one through the meditation of one, so all things have their birth in this one thing by adaptation. That's from Hermes Emerald Tablets. So adaptation, geometrically, it's a translation, a reflection, right? How does spirit become soul? And what I've learned in much of this through number and space, through geometry play, and through number in space and time, through witnessing the heavens, and actually experiencing them musically through number and time and contemplating number alone, the number magic, the arithmetic of it all, I guess, is that you are all that ever was, is, and will be. You are a unique reflection of that one only thing. That, for me, is what a soul is. It's a little bit closer to home. And by the way, the moon is closer to the sun. The moon's incarnational role is to reflect the one light in a unique way that will never repeat. Here to matter in this place with the appearance of time and space, so you can grow, so you can make moves. And as you grow, the one only thing itself grows. And this is impossible, but you're a miracle. Thank you. We each are, especially if we choose to dance to the song. And sometimes it would feel as if we have no choice. And this might bring us back to the idea of T square. So square is fourness. And it really is manifestation. 5 for me, again, is the sound when 4 is noise. But how do you make noise? So the example I often like to share to help express the essence of the 1, the 2, or the not 2, and the 3, or the Holy Ghost, is saxotone. So saxotone is the sound a saxophone makes. Or is it the sound the saxophonist makes? Yes, right? And they can't make saxotone without one another. Like, I mean, a saxophonist could manipulate their voice to kind of sound like a saxophone, some better than others. That's still not saxotone. Saxotone is the noise produced by the saxophone, the saxophonist, in this amazing mystical need to come together and create. So when you look at father, mother, child, for example, the child's not the three, it's the four. And five, six, seven to infinity, by the way. But the third thing is this need for father and mother to come together and create, right? So Sienna's painting right now, right? So there's the artist and brush canvas, right? All in fact, that's all in the not two world. But what else is happening? Whether we see ourselves as that, like, reed for spirit to vibrate and creation just creates through each of us, I would say that's true because you are creator. And I know that might get me struck by lightning if I was living in some people's well, domains. But regardless, I don't mean to be ego driven around this, but rather to invoke the and remind us of the truth that we are all unique reflections of the one only thing there, and total reflections therefore are the one only thing. And we came here not only to grow but also to create. Yeah. And there is this spiritual force that demands this of us, each in our own unique way. That's the three. I will say that I feel the trine in astrology is perhaps the most misunderstood thing. We teach it as, oh, it's this like benefic aspect. It's this relationship between signs of the same elements. They get along. It's the most benefic aspect. It's the aspect associated with Jupiter, just as Sagittarius, Jupiter's place trines Leo, that of the sun, and Pisces. Jupiter's nocturnal domain is trine to Cancer, the domain of the moon, right? Like that's in the code of the Thema Mundi, the chart of the world soul, which was given us to Hermes, right? Well, the square is associated with Mars, and that's Scorpio square Leo, and Aries square Cancer, by the way. The sextile is associated with Venus, the opposition with Saturn, right? This is old school astrology. We've known this for a long time, but still, like, how do you even explain a trine? And I feel like it's not honored enough for the just essence and beauty it is. And by the way, learning some musical harmony in the harmonic series, for example, really helps you honor the power of the trine. Because, well, the third harmonic, which a trine is, creates the musical fifth. The fifth harmonic creates the musical third. And in other places, like the ninth creates the ninth. Then the seventh creates the seventh. Like there's only this strange switcheroo with the three and the five. And that's like, it goes way beyond what I can express, or I hesitate to express, because if I also add musical jargon or music theory jargon on top of astrological jargon, that's going to be noise that you don't want to hear. But let me just say this last thing about the third harmonic creating the musical fifth, the fifth harmonic creating the musical third. For me, the number three speaks to, in a sense, the breath of spirit. I call it the Holy Ghost, that brings, the sculptor and the clay together, that brings the saxophonist and the saxophone together. It is that third thing that brings the mother and the father together to create a child, you see. And that thing manifests as four. The three is that thing that brings them together. Well, the five, right? So like if the four is noise, like a saxophone, manifests from dream space into, quote unquote reality, so that we can experience and measure the quantity of the thing, and then have an immeasurable experience, the quality of the thing, right? Noise and sound. Well, that sound, the five, and the three, the whisper of spirit, the Holy Ghost, are very close. And so it's actually like your experience, your personally unique experience of noise, be it a beautiful painting, be it a beautiful sound, or a terrible one, whatever. Like your personal experience of it is, in a sense, how the whisper of spirit itself experiences life. And right, so it's impossible to speak about these mysteries without sounding like yeah, I don't know, an idiot maybe, but this is the best I can do, right? And my shirt is doing a better job expressing the mysteries of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and especially 6 and 12, by the way. Anyway, 3, 6, and 12. Oh, wait, and today is 6, 12, 24. Numerologically, I was kind of hoping baby would be born today, because how fun is that? That's an octave sequence, by the way, a sequence of two-ness: 6, 2, 12, 24, 48, and on we go. I don't know where the 2 came in there. 6 times 2 is 12, times 2, 24, 48, etc. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, which is one of the old Pythagorean mysteries. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. Play with that a bit. But let me just say again, to rewind, like the saxophone and the saxophonist, neither one of those is 1 or 2. They are the not 2. The third thing is the need that brings them together. The 4 is the saxotone. It is the noise they produce. The 5 is sound, and that's going to be unique for each ear that hears. Cool. So what does this have to do with squares and T-squares? They're 4. They're noise. They help us manifest. And I was very interested after, like, pretty soon after studying astrology, I was listening to a practitioner of remote viewing. I imagine it's something that you've heard of. Um, and this particular remote viewer was speaking about dimension shifting and the necessity for him to see the vision of a space that was described, right? So in some of the remote viewing practices, you might write Cydonia on Mars, and you put it in an envelope, and then you ask the remote viewer to tune in, and they're seeing a pyramid and rust-colored iron landscape and other things, and they're kind of describing that, right? So anyway, look into remote viewing if you haven't heard of it before. But what I wanted to share is that this particular remote viewer was speaking about, like, the need in his practice to be able to receive these visions from a far away place, even though just its location was like written in some envelope and locked in a safe. That he would have to do these, like, kind of dimension shifts, which he described as these right angle turns, these 90-degree turns, and it was such a square. It's like intriguing to know. I want to, like, since we're getting so far out now, also kind of put our feet on the ground and just describe this. The world is a curvy place. It is immeasurable. It is the compass, not the square. The compass creates curves, and curves are immeasurable, right? Like, you can't know the perimeter of a circle, the circumference, unless you cut that circle and stretch it out to a line, which you can put a ruler to. Otherwise, we have to take our ruler to the circle's diameter, the radius, and use our formula and that mystical number pi. And so the circumference of a circle is as transcendental as pi itself. It is immeasurable, and that's the truth of curves, right? Whereas lines are the measurable side. It's quality and quantity again. And by the way, like, that's one of the things that's expressed by the compass and the square that you might see sometimes an image in a way that might invoke some fear. And hence the image I used for this talk today. It's as far as I want to go into that space. Anyway, the world is curvy. Alan Watts, one of my favorite teachers who I won't meet, described it as wiggly. Like the world wiggles. So it's really strange that one of the only places that you will see in nature that has a straight line is the face of the moon at the Oli times. Olis, by the way, is a term in the Polynesian tradition that describes both the waxing half moon and the waning half moon, right? Which you and I in astrology, we know is moon square sun, right? So it's very strange that the moon, especially, who is such a curvy being, gets that straight line at the waxing half moon, the waning half moon, let's say the square times, right? Coming soon to a theater called you, like tomorrow, if you're listening to this in real time. Is there such a thing? Anyway, so that square face, the shape of the moon smile, where we get the straight line, like that happens when moon squares sun. And by the way, at that time, from Earth's point of view, the moon and the sun are heading in perpendicular directions in space. That is very true. Should I show that to you? Let me open up solar system scope, really wonderful heliocentric model. And we don't have to go too far into the future, just tomorrow. Let me get this on the screen here. A bee inside a bee inside a bee. Okay, here. June 12th, 2024, today. And notice where the moon is and the sun is. All right. So tomorrow we have moon square sun. You see that square there? Right? From the center of the earth, the sun is this way, the moon is this way. But let me also just show you as I go this way, the earth is experiencing, let's see if we can see it more from earth experience. As we're orbiting the sun, right, we're experiencing that as the sun going that way, the way that I have it arranged right now, like the sun going left, okay? And the moon is coming like towards our face, right? Or let's do it here and go back to the square. From there, as we move forward, it's like the sun is going left and the moon is going down. Right, here's the other square, and now the sun is going left and the moon is going up. Right, do you see that? So there's this perpendicularity in a square, whether it's moon square sun or Jupiter square Saturn, which will happen this year, or sun square Saturn, which happened a few days ago, or Mercury square Saturn, whatever, right? Squares actually speak of perpendicularity. You can feel the tension, the squareness, the corners in that, the edge, right? Like, I mean, even maybe like the blindside car crash. Like this is real astronomical stuff, not a car crash, like the moon is not going to run into the sun, right? But you can just feel that kind of, you know, what happens if somebody pulls you towards the north and somebody else pulls you to the west, right? You actually, if they pull you at equal pace, you might go northwest. So maybe that's not the best example. But are either of them getting their wish? I don't know. I'm talking myself in circles. No, I'm talking myself in squares. Okay, well, let's look at a couple example charts here. Maybe this will help me kind of play with square fear and also offer, I don't know, a way that you can. So who was I thinking? How about John Coltrane? Speaking of saxophones and saxophonists and saxotone. Hey, Winter, thanks for that. I'll put that on the screen. Winter says, by purchasing the Golden Year, you get a wonderful series of sacred geometry and number magic classes, along with many astrological fundamentals like deep philosophical dives into the fundamentals of astrology and so much more, the archetypes, etc. So that is something that I presented live a couple of years ago, and that is available at GeminiBrett.com. If you head to the courses, check it out. Thanks, Winner. I appreciate that. And while you're at GeminiBrett.com, you can book a session. I sure would appreciate it. I'm freaking out. I'm about to become a dad. How do I support my kid? That would really help me. And I would love to help you through this wonderful, great tool of our cosmic craft. Or you can join constellations. So head to geminibrett.com/constellations or geminibrett.com and click the constellations community tab at the top of the page. By the way, you can also click the moon songs tab and hear some beautiful piano music created by the great Eric Deutsch based upon my astral harmony notes, where I take charts, turn them into harmony in a set of symbolic scenes that I hand to Eric, and then he uses that framework, and that's the measurable side, and then the immeasurable magic that he is and does to create beautiful solo piano expressions of birth charts, which we do, and you can learn more about Song of the Soul and ordering one for yourself if you'd like. Eric actually is just this week getting back from a month's long tour with the Black Crows, and he's getting back to work. He's got like 7 charts from me that are on the list, but he'll be recording for the next couple of months for our project. So if you're interested in ordering a Song of the Soul, you can check that out at the sessions section at geminibrett.com. And the moon songs we did charts for songs for 13 new moons of 2022. So go dig that and you get to hear a little bit of tension and release, especially in the moon songs project. But it happens in all of the soul songs that we do for natives too, because there is no chart without tension and release. So let's look at a couple charts. Chart I've been spending a lot of time with recently is the chart of John Coltrane. It was a chart that I utilized recently in a class on harmonic astrology, and specifically the 5th harmonic, and actually in such a way, in part of a 5th harmonic that doesn't show up in Coltrane's chart and natal chart with 5th harmonic aspects like this until we cast the 5th, actually. But we're going to stick now with the ancient play, the way of 7 rays, where there are 7 aspects and 7 aspects alone. That's the opposition, the 2 trines, the 2 squares, and the 2 sextiles. All right. And so now we see this T square. Now, so we see actually at the time of Trane's birth, Mars square Jupiter. It's a strong square, and maybe particularly interesting in Trane's chart because with Pisces on the rise, the Pisces rudder, we say, is steered by Jupiter. Now, some astrologies actually will look for an alternative planet if the Lord of the hour marker, the steersman of the rudder, is in a quote unquote bad house. I think using words like bad in astrology is bad astrology, but we're talking about squares anyway, aren't we? So with Jupiter in the 12th, we might look for a substitute. And typically what you would do is look for the triplicity lord of the ascending sign with Pisces on the rise in a daytime chart. That is Venus. And since Venus is in an angular house, the 7th, it makes a ton of sense for Coltrane. Or you might say, well, hey, Venus is in fall in Virgo. Well, that's in essential dignities, but we should add to that mix. Like if we look at the decans and the bounds, for example, that Venus here is in her own face, although this needs an adjustment. Okay, Venus is in her own face. She's also in her own bounds at the time of Coltrane's birth. And to get back on track with the topic at hand, squares and T-squares and fears and how to come out of them, let me go back to the 7 rays. I accidentally hit number 7, the 7th harmonic, which Trane is strong in, and we should expect him to be, because Trane, at least his music was pretty weird, right? And for me, by the way, Coltrane, who was so incredibly mystical and world-changing and alternative and kind of a mad scientist, is very beautifully described by Jupiter here in the 12th. Well, you might say Trane's even more described by Venus. And, you know, sadly, Trane died very young. Venus in fall might say something about that. But we see, I think importantly, both Jupiter configured to Coltrane's midheaven through sextile, and even a stronger configuration of Venus configured to the midheaven and to the IC, the meridian, right? South and north above the ground, which separates the MC does the eastern sky, which ups from the western sky, which downs. And that's true beneath the ground as well, or so we believe at the IC, the imam chele, the bottom of the heavens, the roots which separate the western side beneath the ground that's going down, and the eastern side that's coming up. That's 3, 2, 1. Lift off. Okay. Anyway, so Venus square the meridian. Now, what is the meridian? So the roots, which is the tomb, but also the womb from which we rise. In Kemet, the land we now call Egypt, I'm told they didn't have a word for death. They just spoke about westing. Like it was known that what wested, which set in the west, would later, after its underworld journey, rise again in the east. Like that's a beautiful thing, right? And there's something so mysterious about the roots, the IC, the Imam Cheli, the bottom of the heavens down beneath the ground, right? We rise from there, then we reach, and then we rest to only root again. And traditionally, it's youth at the rise, midlife at the reach, elder years at the rest, and the roots is the womb, the tomb, and the womb, right? But maybe more exoterically, the IC, family, youth, home, the land itself, our ancestors, right? Now, whether we are inclined to take a job at daddy's company and end up taking over the company, or we are inclined to run away from that fate full speed. Could you imagine if Paul Newman actually became the owner of that sporting goods store his dad owned instead of the Paul Newman we know? Right? Whether you're like inclined to like stay aligned with dad's visions or mom's, right? I see, or you go do your own thing, you're still sprouting from that soil in which you as the seed were planted, right? And importantly, like the heavens towards which we branch, that would be more like MC and how we give our fruits back to the world so everyone can nourish themselves from the gifts of our own unique energy. This is true for each of us, right? Whether that the nutrients in the soil beneath feel nutrient or feel poison, they all lead us to the way that we branch. You see what I'm saying? There's something so beautiful and so powerful in the meridian, which unlike the ascendant descendant, which rudders across the cardinal directions every day, the IC and the MC, they are Earth's directions. They align us to Earth and how we are meant to grow and give as Earthlings. All right. So the MC is one of the career spaces on the chart. And so we see here in Coltrane's chart, Venus squaring the MC. Now, you can look at some astro maps, for example. There's one you're probably familiar with online, and you can click a box that says disharmonious aspects, and this would show up for where Coltrane was born when he was born. Venus squaring the meridian. Well, I don't ever advise people to avoid those spaces unless they're like wanting to chill and not really work. And there can be some tension, like in the land itself. There's like noise. That square makes this noise. You have to respond to it. So there's something in Coltrane's youth and his connection to the land itself that, and this is true for all of us, that will help us branch and give the fruits to the world as we are designed to. But Venus is in the middle of it for Coltrane, right? In this Virgo Venus. Now, Virgo, I mean, there's a lot of spirituality in that. And actually, his dad was a preacher, and that could have been his path. But Venus, who in the like Renaissance images, you will only ever see with like a lute or a flute or something musical, artistic, right? This is how Coltrane would be stimulated. And then his music, like a lot of people experience Train's music as noise. I'm a saxophonist. I mean, Coltrane blows me away, but it's hard for me sometimes. I gravitate towards Dexter Gordon and other cats. It's just a little bit easier to deal with. But Train, like, if you can listen, and sometimes we have to literally learn to listen or learn to stop trying to listen to experience the sound versus the noise, like you'll have a spiritual experience, you know? Like that is in his design. Some of that's the Aquarius Jupiter in the 12th, who also is said to guide this Sagittarius midheaven at his birth time. And there's this alignment by hexagon or sextile too. But I think a lot of this is also this Virgo Venus. The Virgo also, I mean, if you know about Train, like he just practiced. I mean, he developed a whole new way of playing the saxophone. So I wanted to share that because just please like sit with the truth that squares are not inherently bad. We show another example now, and sadly, here's another great musician who died too young. This is Amy Winehouse. And, you know, I'm kind of actually feeling silly to talk about charts and squares here and to only use examples of people so far who have passed at a young age after changing the world. Because I don't in any way want to imply that squares mean you are going to die. Like we want to get away from that. But I did want to use this example, which just kind of popped up while I was contemplating how I wanted to share today, because we find for Amy Winehouse that Mercury and the Sun at the time of her birth were squaring the lunar nodes. There's also this square to Neptune. What's that song about rehab? Anyway, she has Mercury cazimi. Now, you know, out of orb, according to both the Hellenistic and the medieval traditions, where we want Mercury within a degree of the sun. I argue that nobody could know, and our math that we chart these days might not even be right. But anyway, Mercury is retrograde, transforming from evening to morning star. And this is a woman who, as far as I'm concerned, for many of us, like transformed world through her voice, right? Gemini rising, so a child of Mercury. And I think the combustion of Mercury, if you speak that language, also very clearly is expressed. So what I wanted to share here is just a story of tension and release. So T squares can be very tense. I mean, in the work of like Jeffrey Wolf Green and other evolutionary astrologers who kind of followed that model, planets squaring the lunar nodes like Sun and Mercury at the time of Amy Winehouse's birth are skip steps on the evolutionary path. I don't know. There's not much I can say about that. That's not my particular paradigm, but it's an interesting thing to consider. I mean, for me, I'm an Earth astrologer. What I will say about the sun squaring the lunar nodes is we're halfway in between eclipse seasons. And it's like when the dragon of the previous eclipses a few months before passes the baton to the eclipses of this season that will come a few months later. So I find sun squaring the nodes particularly important and powerful. There's a tension there. You can also see the Sun Mercury. Mercury in a Gemini rising chart represents the native according to the tradition. You can see also that Mercury and Sun are squaring the ascendant descendant, the relationship axis, right? Her nodes very much connected to the relationship axis. Well, there's a film that just came out about her, right? I haven't seen it yet. Or has it come out? Does anyone know? Have you seen it? Is it good? I will definitely go watch it. But, you know, like Amy Winehouse kind of went through hell because she was so in love. And, you know, maybe with the wrong guy. I don't know enough about it to say, but I'll go watch the movie and maybe it's more right. Maybe I'll learn more. Maybe I'll learn more wrong or something like that, you know. But I think this is a wonderful opportunity to share an example of tension and release because squares are tense. That tension, however, helps us manifest. That is that like right angle shift that I was trying to describe of bringing vision into reality. It's like the fours are very square. The noise happens only because, let's use that example of saxophone again. Or I mean, like even Amy Winehouse's voice, like that's an interesting example because isn't the voice, which, for a jazz singer like Amy, it is the instrument, but it's a little bit different than something that's external to you, like, brass and pads, like a saxophone that you're holding in your hands. Yet I would still say the relationship between Amy Winehouse and her instrument, her voice, are still like not two. And there's this third thing that compels her to sing and create. And maybe I'm just trying to bend reality to fit my model, but yeah, that's what I do. I'm a pseudoscientist, y'all. Anyway, so here we see this square, right? Tension. Well, look at the release. Because as much as Mercury's squaring Neptune, for example, and that often a Mercury-Neptune alignment will often be seen in a poet like Amy Winehouse, will often be seen in a singer like Amy Winehouse, will also often be seen in an artist like Amy Winehouse. And Mercury is retrograde. He's retreating from or separating from the square with Neptune. He's applying to the sun. He's just applying to the nodes and to the relationship axis. But I'm still very much feeling this Mercury-Neptune square, especially given the truth that Mercury squared Neptune before Amy Winehouse was born, twice, and will square Neptune again after her birth. Like, I'm very interested in the things that Mercury does thrice when Mercury performs retrograde loops. And the same goes for Venus. So you see Venus here with Mars. That's probably no surprise given part of her story and her music. But Venus also would trine Neptune, I believe 3 times. I need to rewind the clock and see if that was true. Yes. I mean, I should not have to do that because Venus is morning star. Shame on me. Anyway, sorry. You astronomers know what I'm talking about. Regardless, Mercury and Venus are both very significantly connected into her chart. And there's this Mercury-Neptune square, right? Neptune in the 7th. I feel like I've seen that in a chart. I know. There's this delusion about relationship things. There's also this like idealism and this ability to really see the beauty in the other. Okay, I have Sagittarius Neptune setting as well. And one of the things that I always love to remind myself before I engage in a client session is don't try to bring this person to the light. Try to see the light in them. That is good Neptune on the 7th mantra, right? And especially when it comes to relationship work, because it can lead to delusional experiences in relationship and such. And this, it sounds like, is part of Amy Winehouse's story. But it built music that released in that way. So the tension, right, in relationship creates this release through Venus, through art. Venus in her 3rd sign, the sun, by the way, representing the 3rd whole sign of expression, you see. So one thing I would say is when you're looking at a square, look also, whether it's in your natal figure or one that's happening through transit, look for the trines and the sextiles. Look for, in that tension, the place where it can release to. Maybe somebody actually who's here live could just write in chat about a square or a T-square in your chart. And maybe particularly if you have one that kind of stresses you out. And we can do a little bit of work together. So I have this Sun square Saturn with Uranus in the mix. Right? A fun truth, like, so we'll always speak the name of the faster moving planet first, but there are exceptions to the rule. For me, it's not a Saturn square Uranus, it's a Uranus square Saturn, because Uranus was moving particularly fast and Saturn was slowing to retrograde. Uranus was moving faster through Earth's zodiac than Saturn was at the time of my birth. Regardless, it's a really strong square. But I also have Sun trine Mars. And so in that square with Sun and Saturn, there's this tension. We have to honor the beauty of that tension. There is noise, right? But where does it release to? And when I'm feeling that, when I'm seeing it in kind of right in the room, and I see it more and more. I really try to utilize astrology as a way in, not a way out, right? Like I never want to say like, oh, well, I'm just acting like an ass because I have Sun square Saturn. You can do. No, I want to, oh, okay, so that can behave in this way. What are more beautiful ways it can behave? Or even when I'm acting a fool and I feel like it's in the resonance of this thing, what is it begging me to do? How is it asking me to grow? And then I can always say, okay, all right, if this is my Sun square Saturn, then how about that Sun Mars trine? Where is that release? Like, hey, this guy wants to pick a fight. What do you think about it? All right, so we have a few offerings here. So Wendy says Moon second, Jupiter in the fifth, and Saturn in the ninth. Right. So obviously a quadrant house system or aspects that are happening out of signs. It's so funny, like where I began in astrology, it was so sign based that when people express their planets in houses instead of in signs, it's like, wait, what? And it's much harder to do aspect theory with, though houses are connected by aspects too. Quadrant houses make that a little bit more difficult. But regardless, let's say, so I'm guessing, Wendy, you're writing this up because they're in a T square. Yeah, it's just hard to see like a second house moon opposite Saturn in the ninth, but that's what we're hearing, right? So moon is opposite Saturn with Jupiter in between. Okay. So one thing I would say is even there, like Jupiter is in between. So looking to midpoint pictures, right? So Coltrane, for example, had Venus in between the IC and the midheaven. There's something about Venus that will offer filter. One of the things that we'll say sometimes in T squares is, hey, if it's a T square, you might as well go full cross, right? So if you have the Taurus, Leo, Scorpio thing, just add a bit of Aquarius and see what happens when the circuit is complete. Wendy, I appreciate that. So Moon in Capricorn, Jupiter in Aries, Saturn in Cancer. Now that sounds like a T square, because the second isn't opposite the ninth, right? So this is the strange thing that quadrant houses do. They help us see the sky and the way that we experience it, but sometimes, equal or whole sign houses help us tune into, aspect groups like this, at least from the old school aspect theory. So Capricorn Moon, Aries Jupiter, Cancer Saturn. Now I know when you were born. Anyway, there's like a cool image here of a mutual reception, to use the old language, right? Moon and Capricorn in Saturn's place. And Wendy, tuning into that time, yeah, your moon is inbounds. Yeah. Because an out of bounds Capricorn moon could make this also extra interesting. But Moon in Capricorn and Saturn in Cancer, like they're in a foreign exchange program. They're in each other's worlds, but they're also in worlds that are said to be kind of foreign to them. So there's a question of, are they receiving help? Wendy, if you will, if you have Moon and Saturn trine any planets, right? So like Moon trine planet, Saturn sextile that planet, or Jupiter sextile or trine any planets, would you add that also to this recipe? Really, we should just put charts on the screen, right? Because it's important to remember that while we can tune into the particular notes of the song and the chords that these notes together make, we need to hear the whole song to really understand what it's about, right? So Wendy, I'm reading now from you that they're all in the 29th degree. Amazing. Do you have anything else like in, Virgo, Taurus, Scorpio, Pisces in those late degrees as well? So the moon sextiles the north node and trines the south node, right? And therefore Saturn sextiles the south node and trines the north node. Amazing, right? So really cool example there where you have this T-square, right? There's this story of tension. And kind of have to know the ascendant. You kind of gave it to me before. And let me just put these other pieces of information up. Well, and then Wendy, maybe I will also ask if you feel like it and you want to share your birth data, I can put your chart on the screen and give a much more reasonable or detailed response. But just know, obviously, this is live and being recorded. It will be on my YouTube page, and I totally understand if you don't want to go that way. For now, I can just, let's go back to the T-square itself. So Capricorn moon, opposite Cancer, Saturn. And cool, Wendy, thank you. And right, so I don't really need, well, yeah, we might as well go for it. So actually, Wendy just put her birth data up. So let me put this chart on the screen. And one more thing. Okay. Born in Wales, where I've been spending a good amount of time lately, and I'm probably not the only one who's a freak for We Are Wrexham. It's like such a cool show. All right, let me push buttons here. Wendy, thank you so much. And I'm sorry that in this space, I can't just bring you on live to talk about this because that would make a lot more sense. So in any case, thank you for allowing me to tune into your song with you. Please take what works and leave behind what doesn't, and anything that I have to say. It's a little bit of a different thing, but I always love to say I promise to answer any question as long as you promise to question my answers. You haven't asked the question, but please question my answers anyway. So here is, as Wendy described, this moon, Jupiter, Saturn, T-square. Chiron in on the mix as well. And Saturn's just about to jump into Leo. He would return to Cancer later on, I know, because I was born a month after Wendy, and I know that that happened after I was born. We have Sagittarius on the rise, Jupiter in the 4th house, but 5th whole sign. Super creative being here, and this Venus, Jupiter certainly would assist in this, especially a Leo Venus, very far from the sun, bright and beautiful, being reborn as morning star at the time of Wendy's birth, just about to station direct, and Libra at the midheaven. Another way I would go with that, Virgo up as the 10th whole sign and a Libra Mercury. So Leo Venus and a Libra midheaven, a Libra Mercury with Virgo on high, like this very creative being. I can't see your comments right now, Wendy, but I would assume that you are an artist and that your art has been the result of some of the tension that you felt, likely in, let's say, the cult of culture. And some of this feels like kind of UK stiff upper lip training, right? Saturn in Cancer. But look at Sagittarius rising. What's rising when you rose is rising within you. You are here learning the path of the seeker. Jupiter in Aries in the 5th. There's something in our passionate artistic creations. When I say 5th, I mean 5th whole sign. In the 4th, it's something in the heritage of the land, the ancestry, which can invoke this too. Neptune on the rise, like clearly born to be a mystic. I'm so glad that you have found that reality. And sometimes we have to kind of step away from the versions of Capricorn and Cancer, which are being taught in school, and find the old versions, which are like, in the land in which you were born, the stone circle builders, the ancient ones, the Merlins, the great grandmothers and such who help us remember the spirit of the land itself, which I feel here. Like, I hope, Wendy, that you create like earthworks and ceramics even would be a way to do this, but larger projects like building stone circles and aligning to the mysteries of the heaven and the earth, I can see in this way, like very clearly a spiritual being. But my guess is, with Saturn positioned where he is, well, I don't know that it's religion as much as it's just, again, like the culture that would ask us like not to tune into the power of our like heart intelligence, our EQ, and somehow the need to break away from traditions that would stimulate, like keep us locked down. There's a story that everyone's probably heard of called Romeo and Juliet, and maybe as much as the fact, like the speed of Mercury helps me see this T square that you've offered as an example, and again, thank you, between Capricorn, Moon, Aries, Jupiter, and Chiron, and Cancer, Saturn. Well, with Mercury's rate, like he's going to move into that T square to make a fixed cross. I'm wondering, not before Saturn leaves the sign, though, by the way, which just happened so soon after you were born. But with Mercury representing the seventh and Jupiter representing the first, and Jupiter in the fifth whole sign, it really feels to me like a good amount of Romeo and Juliet here, which is this great story of breaking out of like family feuds, right? And this idea that these are the rules and this is what it is to be a whatever, and we don't marry those people or something like that, right? That's really just going to stimulate your own personal passions. And I think in here, the release in this Venus Jupiter trine, for example, there is just such like sacred art and spiritual Venus in the ninth house, ninth whole sign, like this kind of beautiful, like spiritual art. Now, what does that mean? Like, is it actually paintings of goddess? I mean, living life is spiritual art. So, I don't want to get too particular here, but there's just such a powerful release point to this Venus who's right in between the rays of Jupiter and Chiron, right? Like heading back from Chiron to Jupiter. There's some way of where this kind of challenge of individuating Aries from the Cancer, Capricorn kind of like family and culture complex leads to this artistic expression, to this passion, to this love. And probably Venus actually gave Jupiter, who represents you and all beings with Sagittarius on the rise, the steersman of this rudder, the lord of this horoscope, who probably actually instigated his breaking away. And so, yeah, I'm really feeling like Romeo Juliet here. And then, so the other piece that you mentioned was with this T square of Moon, Jupiter, Chiron, Saturn. There's this other release point from the Moon Saturn point of view where they form the mystic rectangle with the lunar nodes. I think if I change this orb set, we would see that. I guess it's not being drawn in. Orbs. Anyway, yeah, the Scorpio, Taurus, and Cancer, Capricorn, mystic rectangle. By the way, those are the four signs that are said to be blind to Gemini and Sagittarius. It's helpful, so helpful to look at a whole chart, because other things I see is like Mercury, who represents not only the 10th whole sign, but also the 7th, any way you slice it. So the other is in this powerful trine with Mars. So I don't know. I'm going to look into the comments and I get to read, oh, you enjoy drawing sacred geometry. Awesome. So Leo, Venus in the ninth, and Leo, the sun, is in Virgo, the 10th whole sign. And then you wrote, you did break away from your family in your 20s, and your creativity did start then as well. Can I just ask, Wendy, and please feel free to say no comment if this is asking for too much information, especially in the public sphere. Was your breakaway from your family instigated by love or a relationship or passion? while I'm waiting for a response that might not come, Onely Cairo Rodriguez says I have multiple T squares in my natal chart. And yeah, so I think I will end on that image, right? Like, what does it mean to be? Is it hip to be square? Let's invoke the great Huey Lewis here. And I would say yes. Our squares beg us to change. They also assist us in being change agents. Now, as you change, everything changes. Wendy writes here, no, it wasn't like a relationship. It was a desire for freedom, felt controlled by family, right? So that Capricorn moon, and she writes, I suppose it was for the desire to find true love. Yeah, well, I appreciate you massaging the story so that it might comply to my vision of, this is an important reminder for astrologers, and it's especially difficult in a forum like this where I can't speak with somebody, right? Like, don't tell somebody who they are, ask them, right? Um, Yeah, so and Wendy, thank you again so much for allowing your chart to be an example. I want to share it one more time because when you say that you felt controlled by your family, right, that's very much how Moon Saturn in general, and especially in these Capricorn Cancer signs, can play out. We might expect it even more if they were in the fourth, 10th or something like this. But they really are here to instigate. And let me bring that T square back in. This individuation of you, this like birth of your passion, your creativity. Um, and let me just say with Jupiter Chiron, there's something about having been quote unquote orphaned as Chiron was. This is true for all of us since we've incarnated and we've, felt the separation from spirit and all that was, is, and will be. But there's something about then being one who can very much inspire the other quote unquote orphans, right? And again, I don't mean like somebody who was left at birth by parents on the church doorstep. I mean just somebody who incarnated. Sometimes this plays out with more kind of literal expression in the human life. But it's a strange thing to feel like your family is not your family, but you're compelled then to find your soul family, right? And I think that's very much in the magic of that story of tension and release in your chart. And how the thing I didn't finish is how having it tied to the lunar nodes is a resolution point, right? In this mystic rectangle. The mystic rectangle, by the way, just very appropriately named, as is Neptune rising. That's like a built-in mystic everything. This is going to lead to a more kind of spiritual understanding, like a soul family, if you will. And I see that in some regards as like part of your purpose. Okay, finally, is it hip to be square? Yes. Not only do squares help us manifest, they almost force us to, and it's typically through a tension, right? So when you need to seek freedom from a controlling family, that controlling family offered the gift of birthing a freedom fighter or freedom maker is a better word to say. I remember being in a client session once, and the man was telling me how he made it to Broadway, and he was just so excited to like show his father that despite it all, like despite all of his father's controls and the no you can'ts and whatnot, he made it his dream come to life. He made Broadway anyway. And I did it despite my father. I was like, dude, you did it because of your father. And then we cried together for a while, right? But you see, it's like the tension creates that initiatory space that you must respond to, right? Like trines, so beautiful, so spiritual, sextiles to but they don't compel you to change. We want to say compel, get all loud, like I'm squaring y'all, and it can be hip to be square. As much as having Sun conjunct Neptune. Looking at some of you out there, it's hard to see Sun Neptune people, by the way. Like, will help Neptune shine light to you and through you into the world. Like, you are a Neptunian. Having squares in the chart help you be square. Help, having these agents of change in the natal chart help create a change agent here on Earth. And then we have to deal with resisting the temptation to change the world by shaking others awake. Because nobody wants to be awakened by an alarm clock. Sometimes in this mystic rectangle in your chart, Wendy, especially with the node in the 12th, will help you remember the truth that the greatest way that you can bring change is by whispering to the sleeper, by helping to inform their dreams, and here's that Aries Jupiter, right, to keep the fire lit while they sleep, to keep them warm, and so they can rest peacefully and awaken with that vision intact. So not a freedom fighter at some point, right, to break away, but a freedom maker. And this is what seeking is all about. So again, Wendy, thank you so much for letting your chart be a vehicle at the end for us to explore through. What a gift, friends, to receive the present of your presence. Thank you so much. I would love it so much if you would give this video a like, if you'd share it around with folks who, like you, love the starry science. I'd love for you to come join me in constellations. Many of you already have. Align your star with ours. You will connect with many star seekers of like heart and mind. We're having a lot of fun in that place. And by the way, again, those of you who are in constellations, Phelan Shiva will teach her first monthly Astro Tarot correspondences class tonight, 4 p.m. Pacific. It's going to be amazing. I'm really looking forward to being there. If you want to support my work in any other way, you can find a sessions link at geminibrett.com, courses page there. Or if you want to just buy me a cup of tea, geminibrett.com/donate. Here's looking at you. Thank you for drinking Astrology with me today. I'll see you next week at Starry Telling Hour, if not before. And if I don't show up, baby girl. All right, see you in space, friends.